Today, the President of the United States is something no sitting president has ever done in the history of this republic. He walked into the Supreme Court and watched his own lawyers argue that people born on American soil to parents without the right papers don't deserve to be called Americans. He sat there in that room looking at those 9 justices, confident, righteous, like a man who built something. And I need you to understand something before we go any further. That man is the grandson of an immigrant who came here to dodge a draft, chased money into Canada, went back to Germany, tried to stay in Germany, got kicked out of Germany, and only came back to America because he had no other choice. Let me say that again. America was the last resort. So before we talk about anybody else's paperwork, let's talk about the Trumps. Let's run the itinerary. Friedrich Trump, born in Karlstadt, Bavaria, 1869. 16 years old, he left Germany, not because he loved freedom, not because he believed in the American dream, but because Germany wanted him to serve in the military and he didn't want to go. He was a draft dodger. He came to America. Fine. Lots of people come to America. But here's where the story gets interesting. Friedrich didn't plant roots. Friedrich chased money. He made his way to Seattle. Then he followed the gold rush, not to America, to the Yukon Territory, Canada. He set up businesses there serving gold prospectors, extracting wealth, building nothing permanent, owing allegiance to no flag in particular. Then, and this is the part the Solicitor General doesn't want you thinking about while he's up there arguing about allegiance, Friedrich packed up and went back to Germany. He met a woman. He married her. He intended to say. Germany said no. Not because he was too American, because he had dodged military service and left without notice. They stripped his German citizenship and expelled him. America wasn't chosen. America was what happened when the door closed behind him. That's the foundation. That is the bedrock of the Trump family's American history. A draft dodger, a gold rush opportunist, a man who tried to go home and got rejected. Now his grandson is sitting there, while before the Supreme Court his argument being put forth is that people who come here and have children aren't really American because their allegiance isn't here. Sir, your grandfather's allegiance was to who? Canada? Germany? Oh, money. Fred Trump Sr., born in the Bronx, 1905. Born to 2 German nationals, neither of whom were American citizens. Born speaking German as his first language. Raised in a German-speaking household. A pure textbook birthright citizen. The exact category his son is now at the Supreme Court trying to eliminate. Fred Trump built his real estate empire on the foundation of a citizenship he received simply by being born here. To 2 foreign nationals who, under the executive order his son signed, would not have produced an American citizen. And for decades, this family lied about even being German. Told people they were Swedish. Put it in a book. Maintained the lie until it became embarrassing to deny. The family that is now the loudest voice in America about who belongs here spent generations hiding where they came from. Mary Ann MacLeod, born on the Isle of Lewis, Scotland, 1912. Daughter of a fisherman, one of 10 children. Gaelic was her first language. She arrived in America in 1930 with $50 and got a job as a maid. She didn't naturalize until March 10, 1942. Donald Trump was born in 1946. So his citizenship is technically intact. His mother was a citizen by the time he arrived. He clears his own bar. But his father, built on birthright citizenship, he's trying to destroy. His grandfather, whose allegiance was to this country at best a consolation prize, the structure collapses the moment you apply the standard evenly. An equal application of the law is supposed to be the whole point. Now let's look at the people sitting around this table. If we're sending people back, and if citizenship requires allegiance and papers and the right parents at the right time, start with his own cabinet. Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, the man conducting American foreign policy for the entire planet, son of Cuban immigrants. Neither parent was a citizen when he was born. He is a birthright citizen. Under the executive order his boss signed, Marco Rubio is not an American. J.D. Vance, President of the United States, married to Usha Chilukuri Vance, daughter of Indian immigrants, not naturalized citizens, Indian immigrants, which means under the executive order her husband's administration signed and is currently arguing before the Supreme Court, Usha Vance is a birthright citizen. And their 3 children, Ewan, Vivek, and Mirabelle, would be illegal. Let me say that plainly. The Vice President of the United States, the number 2 in the line of succession, has a wife who exists as an American citizen only because of the constitutional protection his administration is trying to eliminate. And his children, born to a birthright citizen mother whose own citizenship would be invalidated under this framework, would have no country, stateless, on American soil, by their own father's policy. J.D. Vance stood on every stage in America talking about immigration, talking about who belongs, talking about the Great Replacement, while sleeping next to the evidence that shows the whole argument is garbage. His house, his wife, his kids are the counter-argument. Nikki Haley, former UN ambassador, born in South Carolina to Indian immigrants. Her father didn't naturalize until 1978, 6 years after her birth. Her mother didn't naturalize until 2003. Under the Trump standard, Nikki Haley is not an American. Kamala Harris, the woman they spent 4 years questioning, doubting, challenging, born in Oakland to a Jamaican father and an Indian mother who was here on a student visa. The executive order was reportedly written, according to legal scholars at the Cato Institute, with a specific provision designed to retroactively delegitimize her citizenship. They called it the Kamala Harris Clause. They wrote an executive order with her in mind, while surrounded by people who wouldn't pass their own test. The audacity is not accidental, it's architectural. But I need to stop here, because there's something happening in that courtroom today that goes deeper than hypocrisy. The Solicitor General, the president's lawyer, stood before the 9 justices and invoked a case called Elk v. Wilkins, 1884. That's the ruling that said Native Americans born on U.S. soil were not automatically citizens because their allegiance belonged to their tribes, not to the United States government. He used that case today, in 2026, to argue that people without allegiance to America shouldn't have citizen children. Let me translate what just happened. The legal framework being used to strip birthright citizenship from the children of immigrants is built on a ruling that was used to deny citizenship to the original inhabitants of this continent. The people who were here before there was a United States, before there was a Constitution, before there was a 14th Amendment, before there was an America to owe allegiance to. Their allegiance to a prior sovereign means their own nations, on their own land, was used as a legal mechanism to say they didn't belong in a country built on top of everything they had. And now that same logic is being recycled to decide who doesn't belong. If allegiance to a prior sovereign is the disqualifying factor, then I have a very simple question. Whose jurisdiction was this land under before 1776? Because if we're being honest and consistent and constitutional, the first ones who go should be, they're not the ones coming across the southern border. Let's talk about what this country actually is, because somewhere in between the executive orders and the Supreme Court arguments and the deportation flights, actually the detention, different the 13th Amendment discussion, somebody forgot the founding story. This country was not built by people who were already here. It was built by people who came here. German engineers, Italian laborers, Irish railroad workers dying in the Nevada desert, Jewish intellectuals fleeing European persecution, Chinese workers who built the Transcontinental Railroad and then got legally excluded from the country they built, Mexican farmers whose land was annexed before they ever crossed the border, Caribbean nurses who held this healthcare system together, Indian software engineers who built Silicon Valley's backbone, African Americans who didn't immigrate, but whose forced labor built the agricultural and economic foundation of the entire antebellum economy. The so-called greatness of this country is not despite all of that. It is all of that. The melting pot is not a metaphor. It's the mechanism. Every wave of immigration brought something: language, food, music, medicine, mathematics, architecture, philosophy. The diversity isn't decoration, it's the engine. And let's be precise about something, because when we say immigration, we need to understand what's actually being said. This isn't about immigration. This is about European immigration. The distinction being drawn quietly, carefully, legally, is not between documented and undocumented. It's not between allegiant and non-allegiant. It's not between committed and temporary. It's between white and non-white. White Afrikaners from South Africa, descendants of Dutch and German colonizers, are being welcomed, fast-tracked, given refugee status, high-fived on the way through the door. People fleeing gang violence in Honduras, denied. People fleeing political persecution in Haiti, turned back. People whose families have been here for 3 generations, but whose papers weren't perfect, deported. But Afrikaners, whose ancestors colonized, brutalized, and apartheid an entire African nation, get a warm welcome because they are of European descent and claim to be persecuted by a black-led government. The filter isn't about allegiance. The filter isn't about paperwork. The filter is a color wheel, and everybody with eyes can see it. Now, here's the stupidity of it all. The man arguing that birthright citizenship is a loophole is the beneficiary of birthright citizenship. His father was a birthright citizen, son of 2 German nationals. His grandfather came here to dodge a draft, ran businesses in Canada, went back to Germany, tried to stay, got expelled, and returned as a last resort. His first 3 children were born to a woman, Ivana, who wasn't an American citizen until after all 3 of them had arrived. His Secretary of State would not be an American under his own order. His former UN ambassador would not be an American under his own order. The vice president he spent 4 years delegitimizing, specifically targeted by name in the legal architecture of the very order being argued today, and the legal precedent he's using to do all of this, was originally written to deny citizenship to the people whose land this was before any of us got here. This is not a legal argument. This is not a constitutional debate. This is a performance of belonging, staged by people who would fail their own audition, designed to make some of us feel like we were never supposed to be here. But here's what they can't erase. This country, the actual country, not the mythology, was built by hands from every corner of the earth, shaped by languages they told people to forget, fed by crops planted by people who were never paid, healed by doctors they tried to keep out, defended by soldiers they wouldn't let sit at the front of a bus. This is America. Not the executive order, not the courtroom performance, not the family that came here by default and now decides who gets to stay. The first one who should go, under their own standard, by their own logic, measured against their own test, is the one sitting in the gallery today, watching 9 justices decide the fate of the country that his grandfather only ended up in because Germany said no. Watch the pattern. This is Keith. Whether you agree or disagree, I welcome all your comments. This is important. Keith speaks.